A modern day remake of Matthew Vaughn's Lay a Kick. A Coen brothers end up with Timothy Chalamet. A Citizen Kane prequel, a Midnight Cowboy sequel. Alvin and the Chipmunks deserve another squeakquel. There's so many new ways to revisit Sideways, but a graphic novel is how we choose to update. But we still hold fast, you can't change the past on the Ruined Childhoods podcast.
When you carry a 00 number, you have a license to kill, not get killed. This is a line spoken by the character M in the 1962 James Bond spy adventure, Dr. No, the first in the official 007 film canon. Nearly 60 years later, M would quote Jack London at James Bond's funeral by saying, "The proper function of man is to live, not to exist. I shall not waste my days in trying to prolong them. I shall use my time." M is the chief of the Secret Intelligence Service and oversees its 00 program, usually trying to rein in James Bond's ego and keep him in line. Allegedly inspired by Royal Navy Rear Admiral John Godfrey, the character M has been portrayed by a number of esteemed actors since first appearing on screen in Dr. No. Bernard Lee would originate the character in Dr. No. Robert Brown would take over from 1977's The Spy Who Loved Me through 1989's License to Kill, with the exception of Edward Fox assuming the role in 1983's Never Say Never Again. In 1995, Dame Judi Dench became the big boss behind the leather door, but would hand the reins over to Ralph Fiennes in 2012's Skyfall, indicating that M is a title, not an individual. But there's another actor who played the iconic core character of the James Bond films. Prolific filmmaker and actor John Huston played the role in 1967's non-canon Bond film, Casino Royale, not to be confused with the 2006 Daniel Craig Bond film by the same name. The 1967 film was a spoof of the series, also starring Peter Sellers, Woody Allen, and David Niven, who also fills the M role for a decent portion of the film. But the film's original M, played by John Huston, is the character that creates the inciting incident that propels the film forward. Aside from his part-time gig as an actor, Huston directed iconic films such as The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, The Misfits, and Reflections in a Golden Eye, which is not to be confused with the Pierce Brosnan James Bond film or Nintendo 64 game GoldenEye. But Huston's directorial debut would be the 1941 Humphrey Bogart classic, The Maltese Falcon, an Oscar-nominated detective noir that would match Bogey with Mary Astor, Gladys George, and Peter Lorre. Originally from Hungary, Lorre took his talents to the States in the mid-1930s to star in Hollywood films after he was allegedly advised to flee Germany by none other than Joseph Goebbels. Goebbels, the Nazi Party's chief propagandist, was quite a fan of Lorre's performance in this episode's film, as well as its monocled director, Fritz Lang. Greetings, Starfighters, this is Ruined Childhoods, and we are here to celebrate Lang's 1931 paranoia classic M, which centers around a child murderer, a city that's sent into a frenzy, and the manipulation of the media by the killer that cements him as a true monster. And to quote the character M in the 2015 film Spectre, "Unlike the American government, we prefer not to get our bad news from CNN." Dan, did you know that Peter Lorre played the first ever Bond villain? He was Le Chef in the 1954 made-for-TV version of Casino Royale.
Oh, no kidding! And I did not know that. No, wasn't that the American where it was like Jimmy Bond or something like that?
I think you're right. Yeah, I think it's that.
The American version.
Isn't that wild? And also, real quick, and you know who played Le Chef in the 67 parody Casino Royale?
Oh.
Give you a clue. This is somebody who was very significant in one of our movies of this current series that we're doing, where we're going from A to Z and Z to A throughout movies.
Oh goodness. I'm in my mind running down that cast. There's so many people in it.
Know what?
No, never mind. I'm wrong.
Okay, think less about like, okay, who was in that cast, and think more about who have we talked about at length in one of our episodes of this series, and And which person might be a really entertaining Bond villain?
Donald
Okay.
Sutherland.
Okay. So let's go alphabetically. We did Anaconda.
Right.
So
Okay.
1967.
It's not John Voight. We know
it's
that.
not John Voight. Okay. So B, Big Business.
Okay. No one from Big Business.
C. What did we do for C?
Wow. I'm blanking.
It was so long
what
ago.
we did for C. Oh God, all I can think is C is for Cookie.
Let me see.
And I know we didn't do Cookie.
CC and Company.
CC and Company, yes. Oh, okay. All
Okay.
right. Could it have been somebody from CC and Company? I'm gonna say no.
Okay, Donnie Darko. Anybody from Donnie Darko?
No, it wouldn't have been Catherine Ross.
No. Holmes. I'm blanking on his name, but
Holmes Osborne.
Holmes Osborne.
No,
there it is. Not Holmes Osborne.
No.
Okay, anybody from Election?
Anybody from Election? I'm gonna say no.
Okay, now Dan. Anybody from F for Fake?
Oh, Orson Welles.
Yeah.
Oh,
it was Orson Welles was Le Chef
yes.
in the 67 Casino Royale.
Yeah,
ruined childhoods, just behemoth.
Indeed.
On screen.
Indeed.
And in his own personal life. So shout out to Orson Welles.
And I think there's definitely a few other movies of his that we'll get to. And I don't know. I'm not personally thinking Citizen Kane, though I love Citizen Kane.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other films of Wells's that both that he made and that he was in that I feel like at some point or other we will we'll get around to it. But before we get away from the James Bond topic, I just because I'm me need to point out now you of course correctly cited that 1967's Casino Royale is not canon.
Mm-hmm.
1983's Never Say Never Again, also not canon.
True, that is true. Yeah. But Never Say Never Again wasn't like a parody. It wasn't like a spoof movie.
No.
Casino Royale was like a total farce.
Yes. Yeah. No, there's definitely.
And Never Say Never Again was Sean Connery?
It was Sean Connery, right? But it was a Warner Brothers production, and the Broccoli family was not involved.
Right.
So yeah, it was Sean Connery and I think Kim Basinger's in that one.
Really?
Yeah, like Klaus.
Funny.
Is that the one with Klaus Maria Brandauer? Is he?
I don't know. I don't remember if I've seen that one. I feel like I've watched.
I've seen
all of them to a certain extent at some point.
I've seen it. It's not great. Like they're definitely trying to like recapture the Connery. Yeah, it is Klaus Maria Brandauer's Largo in that, and Max von Sydow is Blofeld in that, and Barbara Carrera's in it. We got Bernie Casey as Felix Leiter.
So you've got an incredible cast, and it's
Edward Fox plays M in that one. By the way,
didn't I say that?
Did you say Edward Fox? Oh yeah, you did. You did.
Yes,
yeah, never mind.
You
did.
With the exception of Edward Fox assuming the role in 1983.
Yes. You did. You did. Looks like Rowan Atkinson pops up in that. So
yes. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and it was directed by Irvin Kershner. This was, I think, his follow-up to Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, that would make sense.
But yeah, it just wasn't. I wonder. And apparently it was like a soft remake of Thunderball. And this
Thunderball, which we covered on this podcast.
Yeah, we did. And this Never Say Never Again was also the movie where if only this was the movie we were covering for N, but it's not. So
we'll get to that one later.
This was the movie where Steven Seagal.
Oh, right.
Like broke Connery's wrist.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because he was the martial arts instructor on it. But yeah, I remember it being and I think it is. And John, you and I, of course, like off the podcast, have talked about, or rather, I've more talked about it recently. the Sean Connery sci-fi
Right. Mm-hmm.
like excursion in the late 70s, and I feel like maybe this was like I have a feeling like Sean Connery maybe like got involved with like an agent or like who was not looking out for his best interests, but I feel like Never Say Never Again came timed right after that the series of sci-fi movies that he made, like Meteor, Outland, and Zardoz.
Yeah, and before his ponytail era, where like all of his characters had like a a ponytail wig or hair
Oh, right, like
extensions or something.
Highlander,
Yeah, exactly.
and then
Mhm.
what
The
was it?
Rock, I think he had a ponytail at the beginning.
In the beginning
Mhm.
of The Rock, right, and
Yeah.
then yeah, um,
Did he have one in Entrapment? I feel like he might have had one in
no,
Entrapment.
I don't
That
think
would have
so. Yeah.
gotten caught on those laser beams that Catherine Zeta-Jones's butt managed to get around.
Oh, right,
But the
yeah.
ponytail would have been done for.
No, no ponytail, no ponytail for the Untouchables. Medicine Man
Medicine
ponytail.
Man, if he could have had two ponytails, he would have.
Oh, like one to swing on and one to swing from his majestic head.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Medicine Man. Whoa. Okay.
Yeah.
Ooh, that could have been our M movie, but here we are covering the
the
film M by Fritz Lang.
We're gonna be hitting it on the way back up, so
ooh, we'll see.
Maybe, but here we are. We're talking about, the quintessential M movie because it's called M.
If we can do it, we're gonna do it.
Yeah, I mean, there's only 3 movies that qualify for that. M, and then there's a film that is maybe like Norwegian called R. Not to be confused with RRR.
Yeah.
Which is magnificent. And then there's Z, which was a political thriller.
Well, and we might be talking about another one coming up, at least.
Yes, that's true.
We'll talk about that another time. We'll talk about that another time.
Yeah, yes. Okay. Anyhow. So now, all right, here we are.
So Dan, had you ever seen M before?
It's one of those movies that I feel like I'd seen scenes of it in a film class, but I don't think I had ever been shown the whole thing, nor did I ever. I don't want to say I didn't seek it out because it's definitely a movie that has been on my radar and something that I felt like I need to watch this at some point. So
yeah.
But no, this was my first viewing. You?
This was also my first viewing, and I didn't really know too much about it going into it, aside from knowing just a little bit about Fritz Lang, having been a fan of Metropolis. But I knew who Peter Lorre was. Not that I was super versed in like a lot of his work, but to see his performance in this was pretty amazing. What an incredible job he does, especially towards the end.
Oh yeah.
And it's a chilling film, and it felt very timely, and to also understand the context under which it was made, understanding the era, especially being a German film.
Yes.
From not that Lorre or Lang were originally German, but German residents at the time. Seeing where they were coming from post World War I, and then of course this being the early 30s, seeing the rise of Nazi Germany and very rapidly understanding what was to come shortly after this film was made.
And not to mention, you look at this when this film is made, Germany is in a deep, economic.
Great Depression.
Depression. Yeah. So the Great Depression, of course, it hits worldwide, but Germany, having already been hit hard after World War I by the Versailles Treaty, losing a lot of land, resources, etc., and then going into this the Weimar era of being of just a lot of opulence and people just
which we talked about when we did Cabaret.
Right. Yeah. So it's very much right. It's that time, this movie is coming out, and it comes out, 31, and Hitler is appointed chancellor in 33.
Right.
Of course, over the the mid to late 1920s, your German parliamentary system is functioning it's a multi-party system,
Mm-hmm.
and that's how you have the Nazi party making these slow but sure gains, and people kind of laughing them off and
Yeah.
saying like, oh, okay, yes, there's those people. And we can't,
Right.
even when
right.
Hitler was named, and I'm going a little far into the history here, but it does, as you say, Goebbels was a
Yeah.
fan of this movie.
Right.
He
This
also,
movie, which was later banned.
Yeah.
Were you about to say that?
yes, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Lang was, I believe, half Jewish, and Laurie was
Jewish. So there's a lot of debate as to the validity of some of these statements. I mean, the whole idea of Goebbels telling Laurie to flee Germany. Who's to say how true that necessarily is? That seems a little far-fetched, knowing what we know about the guy. But for Lang, there's this story that he tells where, after M had already been out, Goebbels and Hitler were fans of the movie and saw the film and said this is the director that will direct our films and be part of our system. And Goebbels had Fritz Lang come in for a meeting and said to him like, hey, I want you to do this for us. And he very quickly understood that it wasn't a question, it wasn't a choice. He was saying that he was going to be doing this, and the vibe in the room was very tense, and he basically said, I will, I'm definitely going to think about it and everything. And then had full intent to immediately go to the bank, wipe out his whole account, and get the hell out of there. But it was too late in the day and the banks were closed. But he got home and he recognized that there were, they were wearing, I think he said like yellow uniforms at the time. And there's just these uniformed officers just kind of like hovering outside of his home, just waiting for him to make the wrong move. And this all comes with a big fat allegedly, but what he ended up doing was just taking all of his wife's jewelry, and then I don't know if it was later that day or the next day, but getting on a train and essentially pretending to be asleep to evade any of the officers that were coming through that were trying to like question his motives or anything. So there was on the Criterion Blu-ray, there's a really great interview from 1976, like months before Fritz Lang died, and he's talking with Friedkin about all this stuff, and it's just like a straight up interview retelling of all of these things, and it was really fascinating to hear him talk about it. There's a lot of people who question the truth behind all this, but whether it's true or not, it's a fantastic story. And
never let the truth get in the way of a good story.
Yeah, I mean, it's what a scary time it must have been, and to be able to escape at that time before it became nearly impossible to escape is just astonishing, and good fortune to have had the ability to leave when he and when Peter Lorre did. And Peter Lorre, before coming to the States, I know he did, I forget what movie he did, but I think in the UK, he did something, and then came to the States, and then of course had like a very lush career. But M was his first, I think, screen performance.
I don't know that it was. I think it was his first like starring performance.
Screen performance.
Yeah. But I think
yeah.
prior to that he was I think I had read he had been doing mostly like comedic, like supporting comedic roles.
He was doing a lot of comedic roles. I mean, he's got those bug eyes.
He's
got a very specific look, and that's kind of why Lang, hired him for this role, cast him in this role, is because nobody would assume that somebody who looked like him could be a child murderer.
Well, no, in fact, his appearance in and of itself is very childlike. He's
True.
got
Mhm.
he's got like the pudgy baby fat, right, and the big eyes whenever when he looks surprised,
Mhm.
or
Or when he's scared, yeah.
yeah.
When he's
So
backed into a corner, literally.
it's brilliantly brilliantly put together. So okay, I'm looking at his, and I'm assuming maybe IMDb has it, but he's apparently in a couple of movies before M, but like one of them it says uncredited and the other one it just
Yeah.
says rumored. So
Rumored.
yeah.
Yeah. So
So
I think
M
he
is
had done a lot of stage work, which, I mean, this is still early cinema, so people were, actors were probably mostly doing stuff on stage.
yeah.
And
It looks like he gets out. It looks like he's moving to like English language films in 33. He does this movie called Invisible Opponent, and then he does The Man Who Knew Too Much for Hitchcock in 34.
for the man who knew too much, I think he learned it all phonetically. Like, he didn't know English, but he just learned the lines phonetically.
Okay.
And it's like, man, to do that with Hitchcock, what a move.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen because I think Hitchcock remade that movie, and I saw it. I saw the remade version with I think it's Jimmy Stewart who's in that.
It's a good guess.
Yeah. And I think that's the one with oh god, what's her face, Doris Day, and she sings Que Sera Sera in that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Peter Lorre also like known to people, to film fans. I mean, The Maltese Falcon,
Right.
Casablanca.
Yeah. Well, The Maltese Falcon, which
you mentioned
where we got to, and,
right?
Yeah, in the
right,
in
yeah,
the
yeah,
intro.
yeah. But then like Arsenic and Old Lace.
Yeah. Oh yeah, hit after hit.
Yeah, hit after. I mean, he does a lot of stuff. It's not all hit after hit, but like then he pops. He's in that 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea thing for Disney, and he did. He definitely worked, and
Yeah.
But I mean, if it's crazy though, because I mean, most actors can work this much and still not have like a classic to their name, and
Right.
he's got
Yeah.
like at least 3. I mean, he's in Muscle Beach Party. What?
Oh my god.
But you look at just M and Maltese Falcon and
I'm picturing
Casablanca.
I'm picturing just a shot of him, and you just see like a bikini top fall into frame, and you just see his bug eyes in
yes.
like bewilderment.
Ooh.
Dan, do you want to do a synopsis for anybody who hasn't seen M, or maybe it's been a minute?
Yeah, so let's get down to it. All right. An elusive murderer is loose in a busy German city, and their target is young girls. With the entire city in a paranoid hysteria, nobody can be trusted, and everyone is on edge. After the killer's latest victim's mutilated body is found, both the city's police and criminals are determined to find him and bring him to justice. However, their natural distaste for one another's methods leave them no choice but to attempt to catch the killer on their own terms. But when a blind balloon salesman who is an ally of the criminals discovers a clue, the hunt for the monster is kicked into high gear. Will they find him and give him what he deserves, or will the cops follow their own lead and get to him first? And as we mentioned, directed by Fritz Lang, who co-wrote the screenplay with his wife, Thea. Oh, wait, I forgot her last name. It wasn't Lang. But and starring Peter Lorre, of course, as the titular, well, not the titular murderer, but Hans Beckman, the
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Oh, but damn, what a movie.
Hans Beckert, sorry, not
Beckert.
Beckman. Yeah.
And I gotta say, so first of all, it's Fritz Lang's first sound picture, and the way that he uses or doesn't use sound is kind of brilliant, and something that like only he could have gotten away with at the time. I think like uh, it was done to such great effect. Um, the direction also was, not only were there such great shots and such great shot composition, but also a lot of the performances, like the way that they show the delineation between the criminals and the cops,
Mm-hmm.
and to show
Yep.
their differences but also their great similarities,
Oh yeah.
is an awesome message just about the state of police and criminal activity.
Well, and
And yeah.
also like just how kind of nonchalant the criminals are about the police. Like the police are just a nuisance to them.
Yeah.
They're not a threat. And just to speak to that, that use of both sound and silence. I think that what happened here was kind of similar to what happened to Spielberg on Jaws,
Mm,
where he ends up having a shark that doesn't work and not enough money to make it work. So he ends up making this amazing film that is so frightening because of what you don't see.
yeah.
And with M, I think it starts as like, okay, like the sound equipment is really expensive to use, and if we don't use it for every scene, we can, maybe afford to make this movie. But
Absolutely,
he
yeah.
doesn't just it's like but he's very specific about the sections that have silence and then the moments when the sound comes back.
Yeah. Mhm.
And it's very, very effective, but it feels like one of those choices, and sometimes these are just, I mean, how the best decisions get made is
Sure.
when there's no other choice and you're forced to say like, all right, how do we make this work?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, when there's an unlimited budget and you can do whatever you want, creativity sometimes takes the back seat.
Yeah.
And yeah, Jaws is a great example, and to be able to see what Fritz Lang did here, especially as somebody who was kind of reluctantly going into the world of sound films, and having created such a masterpiece with Metropolis without using sound, it's like, as a you hear a lot about the actors who had trouble going into the world of talkies, but it's also the
Mhm.
directors who feel like they're being stifled with their creativity, having to use this other element that doesn't feel natural to them.
Well, not to
And
mention, sorry to
mhm.
interrupt.
No, 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 go
I
ahead.
was saying, not to mention, cinema's been around for such a short period of time that these people have just kind of figured out to do things the way that they were doing
Yeah.
them, and now now it's like, wait a second, I have to learn how to do this all over again.
Totally. Yeah, it's really interesting. The movie itself also is just like, it's so captivating, and for a an early sound film, and also one that is not an English language film. I don't speak or understand German.
No,
I couldn't take my eyes off the screen, mostly because I had to read all of the dialogue, but like it was just such a really I don't know, it's just so captivating, and a lot of great performances from all characters, even the really small ones,
oh yeah,
because you really felt like you were in this small city, just feeling so trapped, and you can feel the intensity of everyone's paranoia when they don't know who this killer is, and they're thinking, well, what if the killer's you, and
yeah.
they start going after each other. Um also I love seeing, it was the one scene kind of early on where there's a bunch of guys that are sitting around a table and they're reading the newspaper and talking about it, and they're just smoking. The
Mhm.
use of smoke, first of all,
Oh,
is
well,
brilliant.
yeah.
Just to the feeling of the anxiety everyone's having, where everyone just needs to be smoking all the time. And but some of the, like, cigar and cigarette holders
Oh
that some of
yeah.
them had were so cool. I feel like it was like the 1931 Germany version of like an alien bong or something like that.
Oh, right. Yeah, no, it was so weird. It was like, yeah, it was so weird. It was like they'd have like a pipe, but just with like a cigar sticking.
It was so cool. I mad respect because that was such a fun
It was
element to it. And
definitely a
also,
style. Definitely a
what
style.
what was also cool is when you have like the criminals, kind of the Suicide Squad of the movie who are trying to figure things out. There's kind of that one criminal who becomes a bigger character toward the end. The second you see him on screen, you're just like, that actor's really captivating. I'm curious about that dude. And then, of course, later on, he has a much bigger role, and it's just like he just has that great criminal look.
Oh,
And I loved kind of seeing that develop, and you know, especially seeing it's like early 1930s German cinema. You know, these actors really showcasing their talents that are so raw and new. And also, I do believe that a lot of actual criminals were used in a lot of these shots. And like, there would be times when they'd be filming and one of the criminals would say to Fritz Lang, like, I hear that the cops are on their way.
right.
Can we go? And he's like, let me just get this one last shot. And they did the shot and then they got out of there.
I heard sometimes they weren't so lucky. I heard sometimes.
Oh, I didn't
people
hear
got
that.
arrested.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my God.
No, but I definitely read that too, that especially like towards the later scenes, they wanted to use like, where it's the whole like, civilian tribunal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Where they wanted to get it. And man, just like I love like the way that it built up to that. And I mean, I guess it's almost been 100 years, so maybe we don't need to worry about spoilers, but do
Do you need me to sound the
alert? Sound the alert.
Spoiler alert.
Go for it.
So after they catch him and they bring him in and he wakes up and he's in that cellar and everyone's gathered and it's dark except for the artificial light, which in terms of like film noir,
yeah,
I don't know how many other filmmakers were making films that could qualify as that prior to this, but how do you like you were saying with the smoke and the use of shadow,
right?
the
Yeah,
fantastic visuals, but when he realizes like where he is and that it's like he's like, oh no, I would be so much better off with the cops right now.
I know exactly. And there's that one guy who's kind of acting as his defense counsel.
Oh,
who's
yeah,
like that whole thing is fascinating.
The whole idea, because he says, and this is, so I ended up writing a letterboxed review for it.
Oh.
And I didn't intend to write so much, but I did. And what I was thinking about was so much to do with this scene and how, he's a monster. And this is a guy who murders children, like little girls. He's not just like killing them, he's luring them in first. And it's like, so it's so insidious that he's buying them balloons and he whistles this tune, and that's that use of like leitmotif is so effective and so creepy. And then he's in front of like the lynch mob,
right,
and he starts crying like, I can't help myself. It's not my fault. I can't help myself. And then this guy is like, and he makes a really good point. And it's really interesting because I think like as the audience member, you're supposed to be not sure where you stand on this, and where it's like, do we string him up or do we turn him in and get him help? It was so interesting because I'm watching this and I'm thinking about it, and he's making, and I'm like, well, I agree with him in principle that like, yes, when someone is ill, you take them to the hospital, not the prison.
Right.
But also, and it's like, I'm thinking about it and I'm like, but wait a minute. We have no expert testimonial.
Right.
We have
Yeah.
there's no doctors. It's just this guy who's probably saying whatever he'll say to keep his
Well,
neck out of a noose.
okay. That that said, and yes, understood. But there is the scene where he is kind of out and about in town and he sees this little girl, and you can see him getting this like urge. And he like goes to that bar and he like has some like cognac or something, and he's like trying to get those thoughts out of his head. And I thought, when I was watching this, I thought a lot about Jackie Earl Haley in Little Children,
Hmm.
who is a pedophile and who has these incredible moments where he's saying like, all I want is to not be the way that I am, and I can't help it, and I'm not a good boy, I can't help who I am. And I was thinking a lot about that character, and because I feel like what he is expressing in the movie Little Children to his mother is kind of what Peter Lorre's character is experiencing in those moments. And then he succumbs to his urges and he follows that path. And because we see him, kind of wringing his hands a little bit and then going and like getting a drink rather than just like immediately pursuing this little girl, it's a sign, at least to me as a viewer, that there is validity behind the fact that this is a compulsion and like an involuntary part of him that he wishes he didn't have. And yes, the conversation is amazing regarding all the criminals who are saying we need to bring him to justice, because if he goes in front of the police and makes this claim that it's an impulse, then he won't get the justice he deserves, which is death in their eyes, which is why the Nazis liked this movie so much, because it seemed to be so pro death penalty.
Well, especially for the mentally ill.
For the mentally ill, yep. And it was such an amazing way to demonstrate this. I don't know, the difference of opinion between doing what's lawfully right and doing what the community who has been put in this situation where they are so scared and nervous about all their neighbors and like how they're experiencing things.
Yeah, and that's another aspect that I wanted to talk about, is just putting yourself in the place of an audience member at this time. And I've said it. I say it almost every episode of this podcast. Unfortunately, my life does not allow me to sit and watch a movie uninterrupted from beginning to end, with the rare exception of Jack and Jill for some reason. But
God, you should be studied.
I was doing work during that, but
okay. We were all doing work watching Jack and Jill.
Well, no one more than Al Pacino, but and God bless him for it.
Yeah, he got paid.
Yeah, no, we all benefit. So I just kept thinking to myself, and I'm thinking to myself, because like I'm not like in an environment. I'm not sitting there and watching in an environment where I can just like I'm not in a dark theater. I'm not without the distractions of other people in my home and technology and everything. So even though my viewing experience wasn't like, I was not like just captivated the way that I would have liked to have been. I also then think about, all right, well, if I'm trying to accurately judge this movie, and I know that like I didn't necessarily get the right viewing experience for it, I need to kind of think to myself like, okay, what would it have been like for people to see this in Germany in 1931? And I think about, okay, well, what is it that would make this movie less effective today? And I'm like, is it okay? Well, we've been desensitized because it's been almost 100 years, and we've seen how many different true stories, fictional, non-fictional,
Mhm.
And, where I don't want to say like desensitized to the idea of it, but to like a film about murder, we have seen a lot, and we've seen films
Right.
about children being murdered. There are there are so many ideas that we are now desensitized to. Add to that the idea that we live in a much more se- secure, I'm going
Right.
to kind of put the air quotes on that, but a secure society where, we get our doorbells can be security cameras,
Yeah.
and we can, it's very accessible to have cameras around your home, and we lock things, and you can give your kid, you don't have to chip your kids to track them. There's so many more ways between cell phones and various things that we can know where our kids are, and
Mhm.
and very, we're very focused on that and the security of children, that we're not thinking about, like, okay, what happens when you're in, all right, we're in Germany, we're in a city in Germany. I think they might have filmed it in Berlin, but it doesn't
Right.
feel like big city.
No.
No. And it feels very much like all of these people are doing, like, no one's got a lot of money.
Right.
It's like we said, it's a depression. So, like, all these people have for their kids, but they're also working all the time. They can't do women are taking in laundry to do, and they have to trust that, okay, their kids are going to be able to get from point A to point B safely, but that's
Yeah.
all they can really do is trust.
Mhm.
So the having that fear, and I would say, like, seeing this movie at that time would have been terrifying,
Sure. Yeah.
especially as a parent.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, well, first of all, this isn't, and I think that statement, but, being a child murderer is one of the worst things that you could be, uh, at any time, but especially during a time when there aren't those safeguards that we have in modern society, um, where you feel like you have this civilization that either looks out for other people, or where you feel like you can trust the community to look out for each other to a certain extent. And to no longer be able to trust your neighbor, and to no longer be able to trust also that your kid is going to get home safely unless you are there the second they leave that school building, assuming that it's not somebody in that school that's causing the harm. Then there you go. Like, otherwise it's just left up to the fates. And I don't know, it works so well because of the era, because there aren't those safeguards like you said that we have. And it's why when you do see other movies that take place, prior to the 90s, I'd say, then it has a much greater impact, because there is just that, like, that feeling where everything that you thought was safe is just in question suddenly. And we all hear about the ideas that, it's like, oh well, when I was growing up, basically I just stayed out and did whatever until the streetlights came on. And I mean, you and I had an upbringing that was kind of like that.
Yeah.
I mean, our small suburban world was pretty self-contained. We were never too far from home when we were kids, and
Yeah. Yeah.
there was always a level of trust that even if you were with a kid who was like a little bit older than you, then your parents felt okay with you going and doing whatever, going to the school to hit tennis balls or do whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, that doesn't exist anymore. And there is a greater sense of danger, and a lot of that's also because uh of the way that our media is set up. We know
Yeah.
about more now.
Yeah.
We didn't know as much then as we do now.
We knew it was like we thought we knew things,
Yeah.
but it was all like someone's gonna, sneak a razor blade into that Snickers bar on Halloween.
And the fact that that's still a thing is beyond me.
Yeah, I mean it's so much, and it's like there's so many other things to worry about, but like we had that. We definitely had like stranger danger,
Sure. Mm-hmm.
right? Like don't talk to strangers.
Don't get into a stranger's car.
Right. But
Yeah.
all of those lessons were taught by the cautionary tale. That was always
Yeah.
something. And that's where like after school specials came in.
Sure.
Like the networks. I forget, like I think it was one of the like maybe ABC.
Mhm.
That like, and part of this was part of the whole thing about having the networks, and the networks, got to broadcast and people could watch, without, all they had to do was buy the TV and plug it in. But part of
Right.
that deal, part of that contract was that the networks had to produce like, the like public service announcements, and they had to provide the time and the weather.
Yeah.
And that's why they would do those. It's 10 p.m. Do you know where your children are?
I remember that coming on after the X-Files ended.
Oh, it was so eerie.
Yeah.
Oh, always so eerie. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, an M is an eerie movie, and
It is.
I didn't see it, but I'm assuming that the 1951 remake was also pretty eerie, to a much lesser extent. I don't think that it necessarily packed the same punch that M packed, or the original.
I mean, how do you like with Peter Lorre as this? He's so perfectly cast, and he's like some of the shots too in that black and white image, like when they catch him,
Yeah.
or even like other times when he's hiding and he's running, and he's like when he's standing on one side of the door and he hears them trying
Yeah.
to get in the other side.
Oh, there's an intensity to it. It really makes you feel the anxiety of everybody involved. You feel the anxiety of the people who are trying to catch the murderer. You feel the anxiety of the murderer.
Yeah.
It's great. So the 51 film was directed by Joseph Losey and released or distributed by Columbia. And definitely didn't have. I mean, from what I have read, doesn't have the same punch. But I think that this was more considered B movie style than kind of major feature film. But Dan, what would you do given the opportunity to do something with M?
Well, first of all, my fantasy movie theater that I'm gonna own and run classics, my revival house, I would definitely have M and screen M. I would love to see this movie in a theater, a dark
Yeah.
theater with grown-ups. I'm not going to say like, no phones, but just like, grown-ups who put their phones away.
Yeah. Yeah.
So first of all, so let's start with that. That's number one. Now, I was also thinking, I was like, it would make a really interesting, like a Black Mirror episode, especially if you kind of tweaked it a little bit. And like, we don't know who the murderer is. And there's that constant idea of like, who could it be? Almost kind of like a Twilight Zone monsters are due on Maple Street type thing. But also like Black Mirror has done some episodes that are kind of sort of like that. There was that one episode they did about, it's like you just have this woman who just like randomly wakes up in this house, and she's running around, and she realizes like people are following her, and they're like recording her with
I haven't
cameras.
seen that one.
Anyway, it felt, I was kind of like, I'm like, maybe Black Mirror has kind of gone to that well a couple of times. The whole like, the killer and the questions and moral judgment and all that. The only other place I landed on this, and honestly, I didn't look up to see if this had happened, if this had been done, but I didn't see anything on it. An opera.
Oh,
An opera
interesting.
would be, I think, would be really interesting. I've seen some really weird. I remember I saw this one. Oh, I forget what it was called, but it was like an atonal German opera.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just. It was like it was at Lincoln Center. Produced it at the Armory in New York City on Fifth Avenue, and I remember the seats, like the whole seating, like the whole audience thing would move forward for some sequences and then move backwards.
Cool.
And there was like an extended sequence with like all these people and like all like Santa Clauses raping women, and
Oh my.
I mean, yeah, it's very, I don't know, German, early 20th century, I think.
Mhm.
So, I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like, an opera with that type of material and having and maybe giving the murderer character those moments to, to more fully express what's going on,
Mhm.
in song. I could see that really working in that operatic format, not operetta, not musical theater. I'm talking like
Sure. Straight up
straight
opera.
up classy. I mean, imagine the scene imagine that trial scene
Yeah. Yeah. That'd be amazing.
and all the voices. And I mean, that's one of the things that opera, I think, does amazingly well is build up. It's like that sequence in Amadeus when he's describing first the one voice and then the second
Right.
person comes in and then the third person comes in. So I think M provides a lot of opportunity for that. And I think it would be
Opportunity.
an opera. Oh my, wow. Nice. Where, man, I dropped the ball on that. God, I'm ashamed of myself now. Opportunity.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. You're okay.
Well, when opportunity knocks, I suppose. No, I don't know.
There you go.
No.
You just kept on going with it.
No, I'm just gonna
We
stop
could have
now.
just left it.
No, I'm gonna let's let the fat lady sing and
Yeah.
drop the curtain on
You're
this
still
one.
going with it. You're
I
still
sure
going
am.
with it.
Oh my God.
You just don't know when to stop.
No.
Do you need me to make it stop
I'm
for
done.
you?
Go on.
Okay.
What's your idea?
All right. So I don't think, I mean, an opera would be really great. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think that this should be remade. Clearly, no sequel is necessary. The fact that it is left with ambiguity is kind of perfect. Certainly, a prequel is not necessary, but like we were saying, along with this movie comes great history about filmmakers and filmmaking in the rise of Nazi Germany. And the alleged story that we talked about before of Fritz Lang being approached by Goebbels is really out there. And I feel like, especially since we've had a few of those Tarantino movies where it takes history and kind of and changes things just a little, tweaks it a little bit to, amp it up. We certainly have an opportunity here to have a really fascinating story about a filmmaker. It doesn't necessarily need to be Fritz Lang, although what a fascinating looking dude. Like I said before, he was really into monocles at the time.
Oh yeah.
I think up until he was an eye patch guy, but monocles for such a long time. And to be kind of the prize director being sought out by the chief propagandist of the Nazi party, and then his efforts to flee the country. I think that's an amazing story.
Now, I'm curious. Like, do you have like Leni Riefenstahl, like just kind of like jealously, like waiting in the wings?
Yeah, of course you do. Look, I don't have it all mapped
Like John
out, but
Lovett's
it's
in The Wedding Singer,
oh geez, he's losing his mind,
and
I
I'm
don't-
reaping all the benefits.
But I don't. I mean, yes, you can absolutely go there. I feel like it's a good opportunity to have a story about, Nazi officials who aren't Hitler, who are, doing their part to try and solidify the propaganda machine for the party, and seeking people like Fritz Lang, and trying to bully them into becoming the director of note for their movement. Oh, and this was another interesting one. And this is all the big fat allegedly, of course. But during this meeting, Fritz Lang was like, well, I don't know if you want me for this because my whatever ancestors are Jewish. And he goes, we decide who's Aryan. Yeah. Allegedly. Yeah, it just kind of like laughed him off and said, we decide who's Aryan.
Wow.
And so it's just like, damn, my God, that is fascinating. So anyway, that's the story that I want to see on screen.
That would be good.
You could do some really awesome stuff with that. Also, like kind of an action movie, like a Jason Bourne, trying to get away from things movie with like a German, or I guess Hungarian director who wears a monocle. Like that's what I want to see.
That would be interesting. That would be fun. It's funny because now that I'm like hearing more about this and almost imagining like an Armando Iannucci like style, almost a comedy. Like did you see The Death of Stalin?
Yeah.
Like such a gift for making comedy out of these historical
absolutely.
events.
Death of Stalin is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a right kind of vibe for or basis of comparison, with a little bit more of anxious action, I guess you could call it. Him trying to flee and doing whatever he has to do to get out of the country. But yeah, that's where I am with it. Yeah.
I would like to see that. I would honestly, that appeals more to me than seeing the opera version of M. I'm not an opera fan.
Two things can exist. So Dan, before you tell everybody what we're going to be covering on our N episode of the podcast, I want to thank everybody for listening. And also, if you haven't already, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen. You can watch this on Spotify or YouTube. We appreciate everybody who's been subscribing on YouTube and leaving us comments. Those are all awesome to read. I feel like that's a really great way to discover any type of media, what be a podcast or anything else about a movie that you love from your past in any way. And then we got a lot of people talking about some real outliers, ones that you wouldn't expect to come up. People are talking about, which is a lot of fun. But yeah, and also feel free to email us, ruinchildhoodspot@gmail.com, if you have ideas on what you'd want to do to bring back these movies, or if you have any movies that fall into our theme of alphabetically kind of going A to Z and then Z to A. We're trying to be as alliterative as possible when we can do it, and especially if there's a movie like M where it's just straight up the title of the movie. That's cool too. But Dan, why don't you tell everybody what we're going to be doing on our N episode?
All right, the N episode. We've got two N's in the title. North by Northwest from 1959, directed by Alfred Hitchcock.
The aforementioned
Alfred Hitchcock.
I think I said the aforementioned.
The aforementioned. Yeah, you're without even thinking about it.
That was accidental.
You're firing them off. But we've got Cary Grant, Eva Marie Saint, James Mason, Martin Landau is in that.
Yeah, Martin Landau, a young Martin Landau.
Yeah. So fun. My favorite Alfred Hitchcock joint.
I'm excited to talk about it.
Yes, so am I.
Well, Dan, as you are out there buying weird balloons with arms and legs on them and whatever, I wish you a good journey. You're buying them for yourself, by the way. I wish you a good journey.
Good journey.